Brother Welch, Heavenly Sunlight. Singing his praises. Jesus is mine. Turn my amplification on here so folks can hear me properly. So I'm up and good to go. This one, to be forthright, I'm not sure if I'm going to finish this one. It's kind of long, so I'm going to be mindful. And I don't want to rush through nothing, but at the same time, I understand attention spans. Amen. So once again, as always, I just cannot express the gratitude I have for God blessing me with an opportunity to have a church family and brothers and sisters that I love and that love me and that are so encouraging over the years, as you grind your way along through this life. Praise God, for your family and your church. I'm just going to jump right in with a thought. You know me, I'm a thought provoker. So my thought this morning, and it's a couple of phrases. I know the younger people tend to use these phrases, but I see older people use them as well too. And I want to see if anybody's familiar with the term, the struggle is real. Okay, pretty fairly common term, right? And also, has anybody taken a ride on the struggle bus? we get the struggle, and we get the struggle bus, right? And some weeks we feel like that's our only mode of transportation. To and fro is on the struggle bus. Well, with that said, the idea up under that is the question, has anyone this morning ever felt under pressure? That sense of pressure just on you for whatever reason, whether it's at work, at school, with your family, friends, enemies, that, somebody you got to face, but just that sense, where that mounting pressure is on you, and you can't duck it. You can't get around the situation. You have to deal with it. And you have to hope that it will work out. And you're just not sure. You're just not sure how it's going to go. You just shake your head and you just say, okay, here goes. Going in. We're just going to see what's going to happen. And that's something I think is common to us as humans, whether you have faith or not. That's a part of human existence for some people, on a more familiar basis or a more regular basis than others. So having said that, looking at our text, thank you, Brother Fisher, for reading that entire chapter for me. It makes it a lot easier for me, and I'm not going to go back and reread that entire chapter. My lesson this morning will be pretty much taken from verses 7 through 18. So for the most part, I'm going to move around to a few scriptures, but by and large, I will stay pretty much planted there in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 7 through 18. And I want to point out right off the bat in chapter 4, 2 Corinthians 4, verse 7, where Paul starts out with the phrase or the statement, but we have this treasure in jars of clay, or in clay pots, or King James's earthen vessels. Okay? Looking at that right there, Paul is stating, and if you read, like say, as we read the previous verses, that treasure is the gospel. The gospel. Not only just the gospel. I mean, we say that, because we're used to saying the gospel so much, but that is the greatest treasure in all of creation since man has existed. It is the gospel of Jesus Christ, the very light of the knowledge of the glory of God. Paul is saying, we have this treasure. So you're talking about an armored car, worth way, way more valuable, but they carrying it in a clay pot. Now, when you stop and think about treasure, you usually don't associate treasure with clay pots, right? I mean, you ain't got your savings, those of you at home, got your little stash of cash. I don't think you holding it in no clay pot. You probably got your little safe or the bank or something. You think of something a little more secure than a clay pot. Even when we look back in history, clay pots was common in every home in the ancient world. They were cheap. They were not durable. And they were useless when they got broke. They'd just throw them away. And they could not handle pressure very well. So something to think about. They could not handle pressure very well. Well, now, the same thing is true with people, physically and mentally. Even the best trained of us, the hardened soldiers and first responders and doctors and people that handle intense situations still crack or come unglued under enough pressure. We see the soldiers that suffer from PTSD and varying individuals. If you see a traumatic situation, for a lot of us, a car wreck that was bad enough would give us a lasting problem that we would be scarred with for the rest of our lives. And some of us have probably experienced some things along the way that have just been traumatic for us. And in reality, why? We can't handle much pressure. Just like a clay pot. So Paul makes that comparison between this great treasure that is beyond anything that can be imagined or has been imagined since the world has been created. To this day, God decides to put in an earthen vessel, a little fragile clay pot. Us being humans, or them that were speaking. Why would God do that? Doesn't seem logical to us, right? From the way we think. But if you look at it from our text, God did it to show that the excellency of the power may be of God and not us. So that it would be evident that the work was being done by the power of God and not the vessel. So that's something to constantly think about. On our faith is constantly hinged on the fact of we have faith in God. He has the power. We are nothing. Very fragile, clay, cheap pots at the end of the day. And you go back to the Old Testament and you look at Gideon. Where did the light shine from that Gideon's little tiny army end up overthrowing that gigantic army? By the breaking of a clay pot to let the light shine out. So the pot was sacrificed for a great victory. Now, sidebar here, I'm going to swerve for just a second, and it's in our text, but I just want to take a minute and commend God for the church and just appreciate the church in our text. If you notice in chapter 4, Paul uses the terms we, us, and our. Never I. Never singular. We, us, and our. I counted 24 times. Might be more. Maybe I missed one or two of them. But at least 24 times. And I isn't used in this discussion about persecution and mistreatment. As Paul, Timothy, Titus, Barnabas, Silas, and John Mark set out to bring this gospel of Jesus Christ to the lost world, they surrendered everything to do that, including their physical well-being, so that Jesus could be revealed. They gave it all up to accomplish this particular task. So in the essence of even carrying out that mission was a sacrifice. If you go back to 2 Corinthians chapter 1 and you look at verse 8, talking about despair, Paul writes that we were so utterly burdened beyond our strength that we despaired of life itself. So you're talking about some lows, hitting some lows to carry out that ministry right there. That's how low of a low they hit at times in their walk in that ministry. Look at Paul specifically. Paul was a hunted man. They were literally after him. I've never been hunted. I will admit, when I was a young teenager, no thinker, I did burn rubber and turn the corner and tried to get in the neighborhood before the officer caught up, but that was probably about the closest I came to being hunted, if you will, right there, and that was pretty stressful right there. But him, though, he was hunted because of his testimony for Christ and for where he stood. If you look at Acts 23 and 12, you will notice in there the Jews had gotten so upset. The Jews made a plot and bound themselves by an oath neither to eat nor drink until they killed Paul. Anybody ever been after you like that? One person, let alone a pack of people, done decided, hey, we ain't gonna sleep. We bringing him or her in. They going down. Pressure. That's pressure. Now, before we go any further, I'm gonna give you the title, the frame of mind for this particular lesson that we're dealing with today. This light affliction. This light affliction. And we're going to go more into details and look at how amidst even all this challenging despair they suffered and that they experienced, Paul makes a statement in verse 17, for this light momentary affliction is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory beyond comparison. So if we drop down, we look at, we drop down to about verse 8, we see Paul understood that the suffering in his ministry brought forth life, though. So he's already showing us that by faith, what he's seeing in this struggle. And if you look at here, it says they were hard pressed. Like I say, he was hunted. That's about hard pressed as it get. Perplexed, persecuted, and struck down. But yet, at the same time, they were not crushed, not in despair, not forsaken, and not destroyed. So we see right off the bat, God's protection of the little fragile clay pot. To experience that intensive pressure and still not be broken, no. Note, nowadays, we tend to talk more about suffering in more of a theoretical sense, quite honestly, when we look at our living, at least here in this country by and large, on average. We talk about it theoretically. We talk about what happened to others, because we do watch a lot of news, so there is some suffering and tragedy going on. So I'm not saying that's not the case. But by and large, it's secondary. We're talking about what we see happening. We see war going on around the world. We see things going on in various pockets, but we don't, it's not that tough. And I'll be honest, it's not that tough for me. Praise God right now, and I thank him for that. And I'm not hoping it jumps tough for me, so I'm not looking for tough problems. But I have to be honest, I can't really relate with Paul in the sense of what he personally experienced. But everything Paul said about his suffering was real life experience. He was talking real talk, what he dealt with him own self. Paul wanted the life of Jesus to be evident within him. He was committed to living out the life of Christ and making it evident within his life, not just his words. In Philippians 3, verse 10, Paul writes this, that I may know him and the power of his resurrection, and may share his suffering, becoming like him in his death, that by any means possible I may attain the resurrection from the dead. That's commitment right there. That is a real commitment to the process. Not just the outcome, not just the trophy, not just the win, but the outcome. With my kids, one of the things I was always big on is the fight to the prize. Everybody likes the trophy. Everybody likes the trophy. But we got to get up 4 a.m, stay up late. We got to put in some work if we want to hold up that prize. I'm just telling you right now, you don't win that prize laying right there in that bed. You have to get them to get results. And that's the key word in our house is results. Talk is great. Where your results at? Put your stuff on the table. Show me. And that's one of the things I encourage parents. If you want your children to be anything, you got to. That's something you owe them. You owe that to your children. To be there for them, to assist them with that process, but to challenge them. I think pacifying your child, spare the rod, spoil the child, is not just the spanking. You need to be there to really challenge them to be something. So now, Paul says also that they were always delivered to death, but that death is working in us, but life in you, pertaining to the church there. Because what Paul knew was that God made him more effective in his ministry through suffering. And it's a simple principle. It's the same thing with us. You're much more inclined to hear somebody that's done it than somebody that's talking about it, right? That goes from recipes to working on cars to flying an airplane. That commercial talking about I stayed at a Holiday Inn. We're not trying to hear that. I need to know you know what you're doing and you know what you're talking about before you tell me, to go in here, especially something like suffering. What do you mean telling me positive and suffering? I'm not looking forward to that. So you're going to have to expound a little more about how this is supposed to work out for me. I'm over here relaxing and you telling me to, put in some work. But like to say with but it's a consistent thing. The same with the athletes. Athletes, you look at these high-level athletes, some of them are a piece of work, but you can't take away their commitment and dedication to their craft that got them to where they're at. It is an arduous process. And so many things also have to go your way on top of your skill and your mental toughness and what have you for you to make it, to any type of a professional or world-class level. So now if we look at Corinthians chapter 6, verses 4 and 5, I think you could just preach for like 2 years in Corinthians only You wouldn't have to go anywhere. Probably even longer. It's just so many lessons within lessons within lessons. But right here in 1 Corinthians 6, in verses 4 and 5, Paul writes, "But as servants of God, we commend ourselves in every way by great endurance in afflictions, hardships, calamities, beatings, imprisonments, riots, labors, sleepless nights, and hunger." So he was committed to this idea of we're going through this, or I'm emulating this life of Christ in what I'm doing in this ministry, or to carry out this ministry. It wasn't like he was just doing it because he didn't have anything better to do. He was doing it for the purpose of carrying out the ministry of Christ and bringing that gospel to a dying world. For us now, hopefully, we have a clear understanding of what the Christian life consists of. The Christian life is not meant to be free of suffering. So if you came in today, or if you're hearing this or hearing me from anywhere, wherever, and you think that, you are sadly, unfortunately mistaken. It's not meant to be free of suffering, distress, pressure, and discomfort. In reality, if you are pursuing comfort over the cross, you are not pursuing Christ. That's the reality. That's the reality. So if you're looking for your best interest, you're not pursuing Christ. And if he that find his life, lose it. Now, an example of this is John and James's mother in Matthew 20:22. The question that she asked Jesus in Matthew 22 about her sons. And Jesus' response was, you don't even know what you're asking. You don't know what you're asking. And he asked him, are you able to drink the cup that I am to drink? Okay, that's what you should be asking. You ready for this? Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, of course, but they didn't really realize what they were saying. Yes, too. And that's the question we should be asking ourselves, too. We want this great prize in heaven. Anybody with any sense, I'm going to say, wants to go to heaven. Okay? Or either you don't understand it or you're being totally ignorant. But to hear that concept and not want to go there, I'm going to put you over in another category. But for me, any rational person, like, what do you mean a place is bliss and just eternal happiness and joy and I want to go there, of course. But now, okay, what you want to do to get there? Just like anywhere else. When we want to go to Magic Mountain or on a trip or cruise or something, we save up our money, we get clothes, we make all kind of preparations, make sure our car's running right. We do everything. We make sure we get there. And on that day, we don't let nothing get in the way of us getting on our little trip where we're trying to get to, right? We put in work, we make preparations, and we get there. And we don't appreciate people getting in our way, trying to keep us from getting there either, right? Well, you would think much more to get to heaven. Much more would be required. We are saved by God's grace through faith. We understand that, right? There's nothing we can do at the end of the day. At the end of the day, we're going to have to be saved by God's grace through our faith. But how much faith does it really take to serve Jesus when you got no pressure put on you? God didn't put nothing on you. If he didn't allow you to go through some things, really, how much faith would it take? Just sit there and just say, I believe, all right. And, it'd be similar to a team trying to go out and win a game with no other team to play against. Something along them lines. So it requires that pressure. That pressure is a blessing to us. It helps us to prove ourselves. We see this is not that foreign of a concept, looking at it through spiritual eyes. We need some opposition to be able to develop ourselves and to see what we're really preparing ourselves for and who we are really emulating. Because you figure if God was not ashamed to put his son in a clay jar, to walk around here in this fragile state, then much more we should be ready to deal with it as well as he was. So, what helps us endure this even while we're under pressure? Paul, in verse 13 through 15, states that his faith in the living God is what gave him that ability, his faith. We also believe, and therefore we speak. We speak on what we believe. Okay? Faith creates the testimony. You testify and stand for nothing that you don't believe. A lot of us believe chicken is good, especially fried chicken. Why? Because we done ate some. And we testifying to you that. So-and-so's old bird over there is some good stuff. I stand by it because I had some. So we get that concept as well. Knowing that for Paul, knowing that he who raised up the Lord will also raise us up. So the same God that raised Jesus from the dead will raise us as well. He believed that by faith, and so based on that belief, he didn't despair in his suffering. Because he knew, totally stood on it, 100%, that, hey, I know what I'm working for, and I know what's going to happen at the end of this process, and I know God is fully capable of carrying this out for me. That's why in 16 he said we don't lose heart. That's why we do not lose heart. Paul knew that jars of clay, in verse 7, the jars of clay and the mortal flesh, in verse 11, on the outside were suffering and taking a beating. But on the inside, God is blessing and renewing us. So no matter what physical condition you're in right now, your endurance and your faith in God, you're getting better. You're getting better every day. And you should feel like that. I'm getting better every day. Every day, because I'm closer to that goal. I just got to hang on. I just got to deal with it. Bring them on. Here come the next one. All right. Because I know physically it's not working out so well for me. I don't know about for you, those commercials. I'm better now at 67 than I was when I was 22. Liar. I don't believe that. I'm not. Maybe some of y'all got better at older physically, but I didn't. So when I'm not convinced of that, that's what I say. I don't have no faith in that mentality because that's not how it worked for me. Okay? So Paul, now when we look at this here, he knew that this fragile condition was being renewed by God. So he could go on and say, and this is where our point, that this is light affliction. This is light affliction. In fact, not only can I handle it, this ain't nothing. Now, some of us nowadays will say, well, Paul writing light affliction, he might think his affliction was light, but he don't know what I'm going through. He don't know what I'm dealing with. If he was in my shoes, maybe he wouldn't be writing that. If he knew what I was suffering with. So I want to caution you, and I want to encourage you to keep in mind, Paul didn't write them statements out of ignorance. Wasn't lighthearted, and he was just flippantly writing, no, this ain't nothing, this little light affliction. If you look at 2 Corinthians 11, verses 23 through 28, okay? Stripes. You know what stripes are? That's the 39 right there. And that ain't no spanking like you give your little kid. 39 licks, one short of 40, and they left some stripes on you too. That's that flogging right there. I only experienced one stripe, let alone 39. But he said stripes, prisons, beatings, shipwreck, perils on the water, robbers, got jacked too. Miss all this you try to share, God. What you mean? Here you got? All right, here, take it. You know. In perils of my own countrymen, in perils of the Gentiles, in perils in the city, in perils in the wilderness, in perils in the sea, in perils among the false brethren, in weariness and toil, in sleeplessness often, in hunger and in thirst, in fasting often. Fasted a couple of times. I didn't even make it the whole week. I went a couple of days. I had to cheat, you know. But I'm gonna work on it again, because it was a valuable process. But you know, he said fasting often. In cold and nakedness. I think right there, when we look at it, and then not to mention in 2 Corinthians 12:7, that's not counting that thorn in the flesh that he had, whatever it was, that God won't even take that away. No, you keep that too. You on the grind, and you're going to keep that problem. Man, that's despair. Now, Lord, you're going too far. You know, but hey, God knew. He knew. He knew. He didn't question. He stood on it, and he knew why he had the thorn in the flesh. And he took pride in that too. So I know why I got it and why I'm dealing with it. Now, me personally, I don't have that experience. So I get it. I'm not qualified to make the statements he made. I'm just not. I'm not. I would not stand up here or come to your house or meet you wherever and try to tell you, you need to hang in there to this level that's above anything I've ever dealt with. Because a lot of people in here done dealt with worse than I've dealt with. So I'm not qualified to talk like that. But now, Paul is more similar to farmers insurance. He knew a thing or two because he hadn't seen a thing or two. Okay? He dealt with the things. Like I said, on the onside, he dealt with the things that he's talked about. And then also, you had a body of believers. He had the brothers with him that hung in there with him too. Thank God for the church. Thank God for the brothers that he had with him, that God blessed him to have supporting him, to go the distance. The ride or dies next to him. There's some ride or dies in the church nowadays. Praise God. I know everybody in here, you should have a ride or die if it's only one other brother or sister that you know you can go to. Thank God for that. God gave you that. He put that there for you to have, to be able to lean on. And we thank him for that. We thank him there. So I get it. We've seen whole churches closed down. Congregations, minister went out backwards. The elders, we've seen all kinds of scenarios in the world. And they're going to continue to happen. But that don't mean God ain't got something for you to be able to hang in there. He's always going to keep a position or someone around and available for you to encourage you to hang in there. He can see, Paul could see clearly by his faith, our light affliction is but for a moment. You ever heard the folks use the phrase, and this too shall pass? That's a person that's been around. And this too shall pass. They done seen some things. My wife's grandmother, she's 96. Pretty tough old bird. And that's her thing, this too shall pass. Even a whole life of trouble. Whole life. Let's say you born bad luck, like they used to on Hee Haw, gloom, despair, and agony, your whole life. Young people would know that whole thing. But let's say your whole life was just bad, never any good, born bad to the death. I didn't have one good day. That still don't compare to the scale of eternity. It still doesn't. Job, in the midst of his despair, in Job 14:1, said, man is Man who is born of a woman is but of a few days and full of trouble. He recognized, we ain't even here that long. Few days. James 4:14, what is your life? Amen. It's but a mist, a vapor. Appears for a little time and is vanished. That's just your existence, period. Let alone the problems that you deal with. They're even shorter than that. Let's face it. I have not met anybody yet that whole life was miserable. You know, and I've met some people. I talked to a lady. She came from, I want to say, Vietnam. Her and 14 sisters. And the parents tried 20 times to have a boy. Never did. And she's the baby of 15, right? From a multi-million-dollar family. Maids, butler, Rolls Royce, all of that. All that stuff jumped off over there. They had to get out of there with what was on their back. And she said it didn't hurt her as bad as it did her older sisters because they never really recovered from that affluence. You know, but for her, she's always had to work. It's kind of what she's seen in pictures and know from history. But blink of an eye, that was gone. You know, just like that. And nonetheless, she's happily making it along. She's doing well, very successful. You know, didn't let that past experience break her. Still moving on. Have zero faith. Talk to her about God is like talking to this wall right here. But at the same time, God has blessed her. And you try to get people to see that God, whether you believe him or not, he's God, whether you think so or not. He doesn't need your affirmation for him to be God. You can believe if you want to. You don't even have to. Still, he's God. He's still going to do what he does anyway. If he's determined to take care of you in a certain way, he's going to do it. Now, it's sad for you that you don't recognize it, but it still doesn't make him any the less God. So, Javier hit me with the 10-minute sign back there about 9 minutes ago. so let me call it and close this out here. But God can accomplish in us through our affliction a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. That's not even comparable to what we deal with. Romans 8:17 says, if indeed we suffer with him, that we may also be glorified together. What a promise. Getting the same thing. He's offering you the same thing that he has. Right there for you to just endure the process. That's really, in the end, not that tough. For us as humans, it isn't easy to appreciate the weight of glory, though. Why? Because it's an eternal weight of glory. Often the problem isn't our dwelling on the light affliction. That's not the problem. The problem is we don't understand and we think too little about the upcoming weight of glory because we don't get it. We don't get eternity. That's why meditation is necessary. You need to sit and think sometime about God. Spend some downtime. Just let your mind see that he is beyond your mind. Think about God in any term. Use any term. You know, he is I am. So when you want to say, what is God? He is I am, period, right? So think of him in any aspect you want to, and your mind cannot contain the capacity of what God is. Okay, that is therapeutic. That is encouraging. He exists beyond your mental capacity. So that's good for us to recognize who God is. When you pray to God, you won't be so flippant. You talk about the Creator, man, don't just pray all raggedy to him. Sit down and pull yourself together. You ever prayed and bobbed off and had to apologize? Lord, I'm sorry. I admit I bobbed off right there, right in the middle of the prayer. You're worth more than that, and I'm sorry. You could strike me down just for unacceptable prayer. You know, we always got these laws coming out. God could whack us for all kind of different things. You didn't even approach me right. You're beneath. The way you speaking to me ain't even right. You know, we got to get interpreted according to the Spirit. Spirit got to fix our words up even to even bring them to God, right? We can't even get stuff out acceptably to God. That's how high above us he is. So let's close it up like this. Our focus needs to be on the inside stuff, not the outside, not what we see going on. not this world, not what's happening around us. Let's not look at the things. If we look at verse 18, I'm going to read verses 17 and 18. For our light momentary affliction is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison, as we look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. For the things that are seen are transparent, or transient. Proper word there. For the things that are seen are transient. I mean, they just passing by. But the things that are unseen are eternal. So having said that, don't sit and look at the things that are seen because they're transient. From a worldly perspective, Paul's life was an incredible failure. If you were to try to explain that to a person who didn't have any faith, he's like, he went out backwards, looks like. Why? At the height of his career, he left it all for a hardship of suffering, persecution, and martyrdom? Who thinks that's a good idea? By worldly standards, right? But Paul recognized that the world only sees the transient outward things that are seen, and not the unseen, eternal, internal things. 2 Corinthians 5:7, simply put, we walk by faith, not by sight, right? Now, having said that, Paul isn't saying afflictions automatically produce the glory of God. That's not his point that he's trying to make. Or that we should go around looking for affliction. Like, you know what? After hearing Cleo, shoot, I'm going to go cause some problems. That's going to make me better off with God. I don't advise that. And that wasn't what Paul is saying, and that's not what I'm telling you here this morning either. Nor do we walk around with our eyes closed. I walk by faith. I don't walk by sight. Hop in your car and try to drive like that and ran up around a telephone pole and cause yourself some affliction that God didn't say nothing about. Right, that ain't what we're talking about. So we're talking rational here, not irrational. And you look at down through the years, a lot of things God has said, just taking it put in a irrational manner, and you come up with a different result. So having said that, but if we continue to only look at things which are seen, this is what will happen. The gospel will be hidden from you. Just like earlier in our chapter, the world is veiled. You can't see. And it'll be hidden from you as well. And we'll be just like the world, and we won't be able to see how our affliction is very light. We won't be able to even recognize that principle. We'll keep seeing it as, oh, heavy burden, woe is me, you don't even know what I'm going through. We'll keep whomping like that because we won't understand what the affliction is for and what it is producing in us. But when we start to study the Bible more, and we begin to look at life by faith, and not by sight, we begin to look at by faith at the things which are not seen. Start spending more time looking at the intangibles, the things of God, the things that are not seen. Then we will see and appreciate the eternal weight of glory. We'll start to appreciate it then. That is beyond all comparison. We'll start to get that. For me, that's what I have for you this morning. I'm going to close with this passage that I think will, once you understand that, this passage will make more sense to you. In James chapter 1, verses 2 and 3, where James says, count it all joy. You'll be able to do that then. You'll be able to count it all joy, my brothers and sisters, when you meet trials of various kinds. For you know that the testing of your faith produces patience, steadfastness. That's how you grow. The afflictions are good for you. They're going if you have faith. If you don't, they just afflictions. Okay? But if you do, they are good for you. They are developing something. They're building something in you. So if you're here this morning, if you need prayer, you got something that's bothering you, you're being afflicted, and you want to reach out, like I say, we have support. God provided us a support base to be able to go to and share. So you can stand and share those requests, Or if you're looking to obey the gospel, you've heard something and you want to look deeper and you want to see what's necessary to satisfy God's requirement of obedience to the gospel, you come by faith, repentance, confession, and baptism. And you're added to the body. And you're able to partake in this process with the rest of us for that eternal weight. Let us all be standing. Be still.